My hands were trembling when I saw the email come through. It was from my boss, Dan Weaver, and it was about my termination. I had just lost my father, my rock, my mentor, and I had been doing my best to hold it together. I had taken 5 days off to bury him, to say goodbye. I thought it was enough time to grieve, to honor his memory, and to catch my breath before returning to the grind. But apparently, it wasn't enough. Clear your desk by the end of the day, Emma. Human resources will handle the exit paperwork. I read the words over and over, not fully able to process what they meant. It was like a punch to the stomach. No, worse. It was like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I'd spent the last 5 years of my life building this career. I'd worked tirelessly, gone above and beyond to make sure everything ran smoothly. I'd led a team, mentored colleagues, made countless sacrifices, and this was how it ended. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning with the tears I hadn't allowed myself to shed in the days since my father's funeral. I had buried my grief under a veil of professional duty, thinking that once I returned to work, things would go back to normal. But this wasn't normal. This wasn't just a termination. This was a betrayal. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just stood there numb, staring at the screen, trying to figure out what to do next. My mind raced, but I couldn't come up with a single thing that made sense. How could this be happening? How could Dan, my direct supervisor, approve my bereavement leave and then turn around and fire me? After 5 years of service, this was how I was repaid. The cold words on the screen seemed to burn into my mind, searing me in a way that no other pain could. Failure to maintain adequate presence during critical operational periods. That was the reason, the justification. As if burying my father had been a choice, as if I could control the timing of grief. The email felt like salt in an open wound, each word cutting deeper, more brutal than the last. I could already feel the anger boiling in my chest, but I didn't allow myself to react. I couldn't, not yet. I needed to be calm. I needed to think. I opened my phone, took a screenshot of the email, and forwarded it to my personal account. If I was going to fight this, I would need proof. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, not without a fight. But I wasn't going to fight just yet. I was smarter than that. I closed my laptop and stood up. I grabbed my things slowly, methodically. A framed photo of my father, a small cactus that my team had given me last Christmas, a few personal notes from colleagues who had become friends. Each item felt like a reminder of everything I had worked for, everything I had built. It was all crumbling, slipping through my fingers like sand. Tanya, the accountant, was the first to notice. "Emma, what's going on?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "I've been let go," I said simply, not able to say more. I didn't need to say more. "What? Why?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. She could tell something wasn't right. Apparently, taking 5 days off to bury my father wasn't showing the proper priority for my work. My voice cracked just a little as I said it, but I quickly swallowed the emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. I couldn't afford to break down now. Tanya's face twisted in shock. "That's not right. You can't let them get away with this." "I won't forget it," I said softly, "but I'm not going to fight it." I turned back to my desk, packing up the last few things. But the room felt smaller now, like it was closing in on me. I had built my career here, my identity was tied to this company, and now it was all being ripped away. All because I took a few days to grieve. By the time I had finished packing, my team had gathered around me. They were just as shocked, just as angry. Jason, one of my most trusted colleagues, walked up, his expression tight with fury. "This is bull, Emma," he said, voice low. "You've been working your ass off for years and they fire you over this, after everything you've done." I smiled sadly. Apparently it wasn't enough. The anger was building in me now, bubbling up like a volcano waiting to erupt, but I kept it contained. I had to keep it together. I had to be strategic. I grabbed the last of my things, turned to face my team, and with a small smile said, "I'll be fine, don't worry about me, but you all need to get back to your desks. We still have work to do." I could see the hesitation in their eyes. They didn't want to leave me like this, but they did. Slowly, they all returned to their desks, and I could hear the soft murmur of their conversations. Dan was already walking toward us, his expression tight, his jaw set in that way he did when he was trying to control a situation. He wasn't going to get away with this. "Emma," he said, his voice too calm, "we need to talk." I met his gaze, my expression steely. "You've said everything you needed to say in that email, Dan." He took a step closer. "This could have been handled more discreetly. You didn't need to pack up right now." I felt the anger surge, but I held it in. "Like the discretion you showed when you fired me via email after approving my leave." For a moment, his confidence faltered, and I knew I had him. He knew what he had done was wrong, and now he was trying to make it look like I was the one causing trouble. But I wasn't falling for it. "I'm done here," I said, not waiting for his response. I grabbed my box and headed out the door, leaving him behind. But this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The morning after, I sat in my car outside the Summit Edge offices, staring at the building. The corporate logo above the entrance seemed to mock me now. This place, where I had poured my heart and soul, had turned its back on me when I needed it most. I had always believed that hard work and loyalty were enough, that if I gave everything, they'd have my back. But loyalty was a one-way street here, and I'd just been left on the side of the road. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, about proving to myself and to everyone that I was more than just a cog in someone else's machine. I wasn't going to let this define me. I would rise above it. I called Jason first. He'd been the first to reach out, and his loyalty meant more to me than anything else right now. "Jason, I need your help," I said when he answered. "You're the one who knows the company inside and out. I need you to keep your ear to the ground." "I don't understand," he said, his voice confused but eager. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to gather intel, Jason. I need to know everything about what's going on since I left. Summit Edge is already feeling the loss of my team. But I want to make sure Dan knows he's not getting away with this. I need to know what's really happening in that office, all the mess he's trying to cover up." He was quiet for a moment, but I could hear the wheels turning in his head. "I can do that," he said, "but you're not going to fight this, right? You're moving on." I took a deep breath, looking out over the river that ran just outside my apartment. My father's words came back to me, "Be like the rocks." Steady, unmovable in the face of chaos. "I'm not going to fight Summit Edge directly, Jason, but I won't forget this. I have my own plans and they start today." Jason promised to keep me updated, and I hung up the phone, already feeling a little lighter. It felt good to have a plan, to have something I could control. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I hadn't expected the emotional toll to be so great. I went through the motions, answering calls, attending interviews, but it all felt a little empty. My heart wasn't in it yet, but then came the phone call I had been waiting for. It was Hank Fleming, CEO of Vertex Transport Systems. We met months ago at a conference, and he'd been trying to recruit me for weeks. I hadn't been ready then, but now I was ready for a change. The timing felt right. When I answered the phone, Hank wasted no time. "I've been waiting for your call, Emma. I know what happened at Summit Edge, and I want you on my team. We've been expanding our Pacific Northwest operations, and I need someone with your expertise. The division director position is yours if you want it." I sat back in my chair, feeling a rush of excitement wash over me. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to rebuild, to prove my worth not just to them, but to myself. "I'll need some time to think about it," I said, keeping my voice steady. Hank didn't pressure me. "Take your time, but I'd like to move fast on this, Emma. I've heard nothing but great things about you." I smiled, feeling the weight of the past few days start to lift. "I'll call you back after I've thought it through." The rest of the week was a blur. I still hadn't decided whether I was going to take the job, but the offer was tempting. I kept thinking about what Hank had said about Summit Edge, how they were struggling without me. I didn't have to look far to see that the company was unraveling, and part of me wanted to see it all crash down, to see Dan and his cold, calculating management style fail. But another part of me just wanted peace. I wanted to move forward. I wanted to prove that I could do better, that I didn't need Summit Edge to succeed. Friday afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Vincent Torres, to go over my non-compete agreement. I had already known it was a little too broad, too restrictive, but hearing it from someone who knew the law gave me the confidence I needed. "You've got grounds to challenge this, Emma," Vincent said, reading over the document. "They can't enforce something like this in a case like yours, not with what happened." I felt a pang of satisfaction. Finally, someone understood my side. But I didn't want to drag things out in court. I had more important things to focus on. By the time I called Hank back, I had made my decision. "I'm in," I told him, feeling a surge of relief. "I want the division director position." "That's great to hear," Hank replied. "We're going to do great things together, Emma. Welcome to the team." The next week was a whirlwind of excitement and preparation. I started making plans to leave Summit Edge behind, but I was careful. I didn't want to burn bridges, but I also didn't want to look back. It was time for me to leave that chapter behind, to step into the new role and build something bigger and better. But as I started to make my way out of Summit Edge for the last time, I got a call that made me pause. It was from Paula McCormick, Summit Edge's regional manager. Her voice was tight, like she was trying to hold something together. "We need to talk, Emma," she said. "I just received 7 resignation letters from your team. Care to explain?" I smiled to myself. It was working. The river had moved and the rocks had stayed steady. "I think it's time for all of us to move on, Paula," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But if you really want to know what happened, ask Dan. He's the one who started all of this. The day I left Summit Edge felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. It was the final step in a journey that had started with a cold email and a betrayal that still stung. But as I packed my things, I realized that what I was walking away from wasn't just a job. It was an old version of myself, someone who believed that loyalty, hard work, and good intentions were enough to keep a company from tearing you down. And now, I was ready to build something that would reflect the values I truly believed in. The phone calls started coming in within hours. Jason, Veronica, and the rest of my team had reached out, one by one, offering their support. But what I didn't expect was the overwhelming sense of solidarity. I knew they were angry, hurt even, but what they told me next made my resolve even stronger. "The office is in chaos, Emma," Jason told me. "Dan's scrambling, trying to take over your responsibilities. No one knows where the files are, and nobody understands the system the way you do. People are frustrated, terrified, really." Veronica had a similar story. "The Wilson account is on the verge of pulling out," she said, her voice frantic. "They've been asking for you, Emma. They don't trust anyone else to handle their contract." Hearing this, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I wasn't vindictive, I wasn't even surprised. Dan's arrogant, short-sighted decisions were starting to implode. The company had always been about profits and performance metrics. People were just numbers to them. But that's the mistake they'd made. People like me, people who built teams, who believed in lifting others up, couldn't be replaced as easily as they thought. And my team had made their choice. They were ready to follow me. A few hours later, the biggest surprise of all came when I received a text from Hank Fleming. "Emma," it began, "I know you're moving forward, but I've been hearing from people about your ex-team. If you want, I'll help get your whole team here. Vertex is expanding rapidly, and we can give them the same fair consideration we gave you." I was stunned. This wasn't just a job offer anymore. It was an invitation to build something new. Not just for me, but for everyone who had stood by me through all the turmoil. And I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip by. I called Jason first. "They're offering us a chance to join them, all of us." "Are you serious?" Jason asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Dead serious," I replied. "We don't have to stay at Summit Edge. We don't have to settle for being treated like dispensable assets. Hank wants us on his team." That was all it took. Jason, Veronica, Ethan, and the others didn't hesitate. They were in. They had been waiting for someone to lead them out of the mess Summit Edge had created. The following days were a blur of excitement and tension. I had to manage the fallout while also preparing for what was next. Every conversation with my former team was filled with both dread and anticipation. We all knew the risks of making such a bold move, but we also knew it was the right one. Summit Edge's loss would be Vertex's gain. Meanwhile, Dan continued to shoot himself in the foot. The more I heard from my old team, the more I realized how badly they were struggling without me. Files were missing. Important client relationships were faltering. And yet, Dan still managed to make everything worse. He had no idea what he was doing. He couldn't lead. He only managed to control. It was only when I received a call from Paula McCormick that I felt the final chapter of Summit Edge's demise was being written. She wanted to talk about the team leaving. She wanted to explain herself, or perhaps salvage something from the wreckage. But I wasn't interested in explanations. What I wanted to hear was the sound of them scrambling to fix the mess they'd created. Paula's voice was tight when I picked up the phone. "I know this is hard for you, Emma, but we need to talk. I've received all the resignation letters from your team. This is a disaster. Can you help us?" My response was calm, but it sent a clear message. "You need to ask Dan. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. Your company made its decision, and now you're reaping what you've sown. I hope it was worth it." Her silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. The next few weeks passed in a haze of new beginnings. I joined Vertex officially, and it felt like I was stepping into the future. The office was everything Summit Edge wasn't: bright, open, collaborative. It felt like a place where people mattered, where leadership wasn't just about meeting metrics but about supporting each other. Hank kept his word. He made sure that my team was taken care of. Every single one of my core members from Summit Edge was offered a position at Vertex. Jason, Veronica, Ethan, Louise, and the rest, they all made the transition seamlessly. It was an exhilarating time. We were rebuilding something strong, something real. The Wilson account signed with Vertex, and with it, a few others followed. Summit Edge's losses were piling up. I didn't gloat over their downfall. I didn't need to. Summit Edge was already crumbling under its own weight. The truth about how they had mistreated their employees was out in the open, and there was no hiding from it. The company was being investigated, and the board of directors had to acknowledge the damage they'd done. As for me, I was finally in the position I'd always deserved. I was the division director for the Pacific Northwest operations. I had more authority, a higher salary, and more importantly, I had the respect of my team. My father's lessons about being steady, about waiting for the right moment to act, had paid off. By the time I saw Dan again, it was in the context of a meeting with the board of directors. It wasn't the reunion he had been expecting, I'm sure. I held my head high, confident in my decisions, confident in the path I had chosen. Dan, on the other hand, was a shadow of the man he once was. He had lost his position, and with it, any semblance of authority. Summit Edge was slipping away, and it was clear they had no idea how to stop the bleeding. 3 months had passed since I walked out of Summit Edge, and things at Vertex were flourishing. The transition was smoother than I expected. Hank Fleming had not only kept his word, but had gone above and beyond to make me feel welcome. The team was incredible, enthusiastic, driven, and most importantly, they were treated with respect, not as tools to be discarded once their usefulness ran out. Vertex had become a breath of fresh air. My old life, the one where I had worked tirelessly under a company that valued profits over people, seemed like a distant memory. I was no longer trapped in a cycle of trying to prove myself to a company that never saw me for who I truly was. But as my new life unfolded, Summit Edge's troubles continued to mount. The fallout from my firing was far from over, and as much as I tried to focus on the future, the past kept knocking on my door. I sat in my office one crisp morning, sipping my coffee and going through reports when my phone buzzed. It was from Veronica, one of the first people I had brought over to Vertex. Her message was simple, but its impact was immediate. "Dan been fired. I just heard it from HR. It's official. They've let him go. Paula's taking over as interim regional manager. Summit Edge is in complete disarray." I stared at the message for a long moment, the weight of it sinking in. The moment I left, I knew Summit Edge would collapse eventually, but to hear it confirmed like this was surreal. Dan had been the architect of his own downfall, clinging to an archaic management style that no longer worked in the modern world of business. His unwillingness to adapt had finally led to his undoing. The sound of my office door opening pulled me from my thoughts. Jason stepped inside, his usually calm demeanor now carrying a hint of nervous excitement. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting my coffee down. He nodded, looking almost apologetic. "I just got off the phone with Hank. He told me that Summit Edge's board has asked us to return their business." My eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Really? After everything that's happened?" "Yeah, they're in full damage control mode," Jason continued. "Their biggest clients are bailing, and the Wilson account is threatening to go public about how they mishandled everything. They want us back." I leaned back in my chair, contemplating the situation. The offer was tempting. Summit Edge was reeling, and with my experience, I knew exactly how to fix their issues. But there was no way I was going back to that toxic environment. I had already seen what my future could look like at Vertex, and it was brighter than anything I had ever imagined. "No," I said firmly, looking at Jason. "We're not going back." Jason blinked, a little taken aback. "But they've offered to match your salary, and they're asking for you to return as a division head, the kind of role you deserve." I shook my head, a small smile on my lips. "No, it's not about the money anymore, it's about respect. Summit Edge never respected me or anyone else. They tried to break me down, and I refused to let them win." Jason paused and then slowly nodded in agreement. "I get it. You've built something better, something that respects people." I sat up straighter, feeling the weight of his words. "Exactly. And I'm not going to be the one to put out their fires. Let them figure it out on their own." Jason smiled, clearly relieved. "Good, I wouldn't want to see you go back there anyway." That afternoon, I sat down with Hank and Veronica to discuss how we could continue to grow Vertex and leave Summit Edge's mistakes behind us. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning, meetings, and expansion. As the division director, I was given full authority to lead the team, and Hank was incredibly supportive of my vision for the company. With every decision we made, I knew I was building something that would stand the test of time, something strong, sustainable, and rooted in the values I had learned through my struggles. But as Summit Edge's downfall continued, something unexpected happened. Paula reached out to me again, this time with an apology, though it wasn't the one I had hoped for. "Emma, I know this isn't easy, but I want to make things right," she said over the phone. "I've been reviewing what happened with your termination, and I want you to know that I wasn't involved. Dan made that decision without consulting me. I regret how everything went down." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't change the fact that her company's betrayal had cost me dearly. My father had passed, and I had barely had time to grieve before they slapped me in the face with a decision that only proved how little they valued me as a person. "I appreciate your apology, Paula," I said, my voice steady but cold. "But it doesn't change anything. I've moved on. I'm in a better place now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Paula spoke again. "I understand, Emma, but just know Summit Edge is being restructured. Dan's been placed on administrative leave. The board is reviewing everything. They're taking a hard look at their management practices." I didn't respond immediately. It wasn't my fight anymore, and I had no desire to be involved in their internal politics. My team had left, and we were already thriving at Vertex. The damage Summit Edge had done was irreversible, and there was no reason for me to revisit the past. "I'm glad to hear that changes are being made, but it's too little too late," I said firmly. "Goodbye, Paula." I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The Boise skyline glimmered under the fading light of the afternoon sun, and I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. My team and I had made it. We had built something from the ground up, and while Summit Edge was left floundering, we were standing tall, proud of what we had accomplished. I had spent the past few months at Vertex cementing my place as the division director. Everything felt right. My team was thriving, and my leadership was finally being appreciated. But no amount of success or satisfaction could ease the weight of the journey that had led me here. The silence of Summit Edge's collapse echoed in my mind, even as I pushed forward. We had seen what they had become, a company more focused on profits than people, more interested in exploiting their employees than fostering loyalty. As much as I wanted to leave the past behind, it was hard not to think about how things had ended. How Dan had sent that email, cold, heartless, dismissive, and how they had all stood by, too afraid or too disconnected to see the true damage they had caused. I had vowed to build something better, but no matter how much I accomplished, no matter how much I moved forward, the taste of betrayal lingered. Then, one morning, I got a call that I didn't expect. It was from Barbara Kent, the HR representative at Summit Edge. Her voice sounded strangely hesitant when she spoke. "Emma, I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you should know. Summit Edge is being acquired. Meridian Shipping has offered a deal to purchase the company at a fraction of its value. It's all happening so fast. It's falling apart." I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I had known that Summit Edge couldn't survive forever, not with the way they treated their people. But hearing it, knowing it was happening because of the choices they had made, hit me differently. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though I felt no sympathy. "What does that mean for the employees?" Barbara hesitated before responding. "The board's trying to salvage what they can. Some people will get a severance, but, well, things aren't looking good for most of the staff. They'll be losing their jobs. A lot of them are already leaving. It's just a mess." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. The sound of her voice, the pity in her tone, reminded me of everything I had endured. The way they had treated me, the way they had discarded me like I was nothing, only to watch everything unravel once I was gone. "Do you need anything, Emma?" Barbara asked. "If you want to talk." "No," I interrupted. "I've moved on." But I hadn't really, had I? No matter how much I wanted to pretend I was free of them, the ghost of Summit Edge still haunted me. I couldn't forget the betrayal, the humiliation. But I had learned from it. It had made me stronger, more focused, more determined. And now, as Summit Edge crumbled, I realized something. I had won. Not in the petty way that people typically think of revenge. No, it wasn't about getting back at them for what they did. It was about building something so much stronger than they could ever have imagined. My team at Vertex had become my family, and together, we were thriving in a way that Summit Edge never could. I ended the call with Barbara and took a deep breath. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about showing them I was right. It was about something far more important: peace. A few days later, the news hit. Summit Edge Logistics had officially been acquired by Meridian Shipping. The deal had been finalized for a fraction of the company's worth, and the once proud corporation was now reduced to a shell of what it had once been. They had lost everything: their reputation, their clients, their talent. The leadership that had caused so much damage had been exposed for what they were: greedy, disconnected, and out of touch with the reality of their employees' lives. I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. Dan was out. Paula was scrambling to pick up the pieces. And the company that had once held my career in the palm of its hand was now a cautionary tale, a tragic example of how not to treat your people. But for me, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I sat in my new office at Vertex, looking at the framed photo on my desk. It was from the day I had signed my contract. My team and I, grinning ear to ear, proud of what we had accomplished. Every single person who had left Summit Edge with me had found their place at Vertex, and we were stronger than ever. We had come together, built something new, and flourished in a way that no one had expected. No one except us. And as I looked around at the progress we had made, I realized something. Summit Edge's failure wasn't my victory. It was the victory of everyone who had chosen to walk away, to not settle for being treated like a commodity. It was the victory of everyone who had been pushed too far and had finally said, "Enough." My phone buzzed. It was Hank. "You're doing great, Emma," Hank said when I answered. "Your division has exceeded every expectation. The numbers speak for themselves." "I couldn't have done it without my team," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. "We've built something great here." "Absolutely, and just so you know, I spoke to Paula this morning. Summit Edge has been trying to reach out. They want to know if you're willing to return. They're offering you a huge raise." I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. Tell Paula I'm not interested. Summit Edge's time has passed. I'm where I belong now. Hank laughed on the other end of the line. I thought you'd say that. A few weeks later, I stood in front of a large conference room at Vertex, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers were impressive: 30% growth in our division, 4 major client acquisitions, and the highest employee satisfaction scores in the company. After the presentation, Hank stood up and clapped. Exceptional work, Emma. You've taken this company to new heights. I can't thank you enough. I smiled, but my mind wasn't on the accolades. It was on something much deeper, the journey that had brought me here. From being discarded by Summit Edge to building something better to leading a team that valued each other. The road had been long, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. That evening, as I drove home, I received a text from my former team at Summit Edge. It was a simple message, but it meant everything. We're all thriving here. Thanks for showing us what real leadership looks like. I read the message and felt my heart swell. This was why I had fought so hard. Not for revenge, but for the people who believed in me, who trusted me, and who had come with me to build something better. And as I looked out at the city skyline, I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.